Ingraham goes on this lengthy rant against Democratic women, young Democratic women of color who have just gotten elected into Congress. And during her rant, she specifically fearmongered about what these women would do in regard to Israel. She tried to paint them as anti-Israel when, of course, the truth couldn't be further from, what she says couldn't be further from the truth. Now, with that said, I wanna give you one clip that gives you a sense of how she's fear-mongering, and then we'll fill in the blanks. Take a look.
Tlaib endorses a one-state solution where Jews have no right to their sovereign state. She said in an interview citing her Palestinian heritage, quote, separate but equal does not work. And in 2014, Omar tweeted, Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel. Nice. She recently called Israel, one of our closest allies, an apartheid regime.
Okay, so I believe that at least previously, there were members of the Israeli government who argued that they wanted a one-state solution. It didn't sound so scary back then. I mean, by their actions, it appears that they didn't actually mean it, but one-state solution wasn't something that people used to fearmonger in the past. It's interesting that it's being used now. And in regard to the tweet calling out Israel's evil doings or wrongdoings. So it was specifically in regard to what the Israeli government does in response to any type of protest on the Palestinian side. If there's even a little bit of resistance toward what's going on in Israel right now, they are met with disproportionate or disproportional violence from the Israeli military. We've covered that multiple times. Now, that's not to say that the Palestinians have been 100% innocent. There have been acts of violence, but if you compare the two, and if you compare casualties every single time violence breaks out, there is a giant imbalance because the Palestinian side does not have the same military capabilities or the same weaponry that the Israeli government has. And so there might be members of the Israeli military who unfortunately lose their lives when these types of conflicts arise. But when it comes to the Palestinian side, the vast majority of the casualties happen to be civilians. Calling that out and telling the truth does not make you anti-Israel. In fact, looking at this problem in an unbiased way, looking at it in an objective way would actually lead to a more peaceful resolution. Instead, we have people like Laura Ingraham and other talking heads on Fox News who keep perpetuating the cycle of violence that we're seeing in Israel. And it's terrible.
You know what I will say is this. I went to, first of all, nobody insults the supporters of Donald Trump and that administration more than Donald Trump, the administration, and those people like Laura Ingraham. Nobody insults their base more than they do. They insult their intelligence. They believe that those people don't read, don't have the information, so they can just sprinkle whatever foolishness they want to sprinkle on them, and that they have to accept that. When I went to Israel 3 years ago, I met with people in Palestine. I went to Palestine and I met with several groups of people who were trying to find solution and they were both Israeli and Palestinian. And they all said, we want peace because it is our children who are the casualties on the street. We want peace because our kids have bunkers for school buses, for bus stops. They were the ones that mothers were saying, an Israeli mom who built this wall on the Gaza border, begging for peace. And then one person said to me, I will say this to you and I hope you don't quote me, but the problem is not the people, the problem is the governments who are corrupt and are gaining profit from the people perishing. And it is enough. We don't want to live in fear like this anymore. I sat with people on both sides at the same table, both saying that to me. When you talk about humanity and you take a perspective of someone who is Muslim and someone who is Palestinian, who feels empathy for their own, that doesn't make them anti-Semitic. That means that they care about their people, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right, and to Aida's point about the purposeful, intentional, profound ignorance that they're relying on to spread this hate, this fear mongering. I'm just going to deconstruct a little bit of things in that story. So that tweet from Omar is from 2012. And you know what happened, and of course she doesn't give you this context, is that's when one of the most brutal assaults by the Israeli government happened to the defenseless people in an open air prison in Gaza. And that's what she was responding to. So just reading that tweet out without any sort of context makes her seem like she's just calling and using that fearful Arabic word for God, Allah, in a tweet and hashtagging Israel. And she's also using the term anti-Israel. Watch that, because she's putting in your mind this idea that these folks are anti-anybody that lives there versus anti-Zionist. And Zionism is a project of settler colonialism that wants to wipe out the Palestinian people. She's intentionally not talking about that. And the reason why she sets this up too as people not wanting Jews to have a right to a sovereign state. They don't want Jews to have, not Jews, but Zionists to have a right to a settler colonial state. And clearly that's not what she wants to talk about. And what's really threatening to her about this one-state solution is what's threatening about these women of color coming to the US and coming into power. And that's this idea that demographically, these folks who watch Fox News, the over 70 crowd, the whatever, they're in the minority. So in that regard, within a democracy, the only way they can rule is through the mechanism of an apartheid state, through disenfranchisement, through putting us in these gerrymandered voting districts so our votes count for 3/5 or 1/5, as they're trying to do with Georgia and Florida right now, or not count at all, or creating laws and rules and stuffing ballots somewhere in storage. This is by design. And why they see Israel as a friend is because Israel is performing the same kind of I will say, occupation of the majority's will. And we have to watch out for that, because we have to also understand how white supremacy is aligning itself with Zionism, and how Jews, my Jewish friends, that's not an alliance you want to make.
Right, and look, to be fair to them, there are so many great people in the Jewish community who are against the actions that they see in Benjamin Netanyahu's government. They see what's going on. They see that anytime he's up for re-election, there is a flare-up in violence, because he does what any other authoritarian leader does. They scare people, they fearmonger, they instigate violence and conflict, and then convince voters, hey, you need to reelect me because I'm gonna protect you. We see it time and time again, and it's not just Benjamin Netanyahu. We've seen US leaders do the exact same thing. And so we can't allow anyone's false narrative to seep into America's consciousness, because if you genuinely care about the people of Israel, as we do, you want to protect them from violence. And the only way to stop violence is to actually come out with a peaceful solution, not to continue perpetuating what's been going on. And unfortunately, Trump and these goons at Fox News love what's been going on. They keep pushing for it, and we're not going to solve anything going along with their narrative.
Of course, that kind of fear mongering, that kind of support and defense for a militarized campaign, guess who makes money off of that? That's weapon sales. That's American intelligence that the Israeli government can use, and the US can use Israeli intelligence and also military strategy as well. So they are sharing with each other more than we are with each other. And I think that's something that we can learn, which is that they see how they're so closely aligned in their destructive solidarity. And so when we can see how aligned we are in a peaceful, just way of coexisting, of not even coexisting, because there's more that when we come together that we can feel revived by, then we won't be brainwashed by the fear.
Well, we've been observing the world and have always taken this place of superiority when it comes to other people's governments, and we've always been able to point out how horrible everywhere else is in the world, because we're supposed to be the greatest country, in the world. And now the chickens are coming home to roost, and we're starting to see that our government is not what it could be. But what I will say this is that throw government aside and you go all over the world and you see the people who are being oppressed and the people who don't have what they need and the people who are struggling, and then you have a commonality, a worldwide commonality. And I think as human beings, we need to think about that collectively, because what's wrong with the world has nothing to do with the everyday man and everything to do with the man. And I think that is, that's what we should be focusing on. Everywhere in the world, people are suffering, and these governments are all profiting at the expense of our crisis and our division. And at some point, we need a collective consciousness. Right. And that, when I went to Israel, I left there with friends, but I left with Palestinian friends too.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.